Olá, estamos no ar com mais um Enzima Live Show, nosso programa bissemanal, sempre falando sobre inovação, tecnologia, mundo digital, mundo das startups, sempre recebendo profissionais relevantes do mercado para a gente conversar sobre esses assuntos que a gente tanto gosta. Antes de apresentar o nosso convidado especialíssimo de hoje, só lembrar a vocês que toda terça e toda quinta, às 16 horas, aqui no canal da Pluri, nós temos o Enzima Live Show e depois essas nossas conversas viram podcasts nas principais plataformas de podcasts. Então, o Spotify, o Deezer e o Google Podcasts. Por um acaso você não conseguiu ver ao vivo e quiser ouvir depois, você pode fazê-lo aqui pelo YouTube ou pode optar por alguma dessas plataformas de podcasts. Elas são mais amigáveis, por exemplo, se você quiser correr, quiser malhar, ouvindo essas nossas conversas, vocês têm várias escolhas. Hoje, como eu falei, temos aqui mais um convidado internacional, ele é o Head of PR do MailMan Group, né, o cara que comanda as relações públicas do MailMan Group, Denis Green, e veio aqui conversar conosco sobre o trabalho que o MailMan Group desenvolve. É uma das maiores agências de marketing esportivo do mundo, um trabalho muito focado no mercado asiático. Eles trabalham com alguns dos maiores clubes e entidades do esporte que querem fazer um trabalho por lá. A gente vai conversar sobre esse trabalho e também vai tentar entender como que os clubes brasileiros, como que a CBF poderia ampliar esse trabalho, não digo nem ampliar, né? Começar um trabalho especialmente na China. So, Dennis, first of all, welcome to Enzima. Thanks for being here. It's an honor to have you here with us. I would like to start asking you to explain to those who don't know, what is the MailMan Group and what do you do? Welcome.
Felipe, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to sit here in Shanghai and talk with you over in Brazil. Hopefully when COVID settles down, we can maybe meet up in person somewhere in the world. So yeah, pleasure to be here. I'm Denis and I head up the PR team at MailMan Group. And for those who aren't too familiar with MailMan, MailMan is a global sports digital agency and consultancy, which is headquartered in Shanghai in China. And we also have offices in Singapore, in Los Angeles, and in London. And that's the MailMan Group, which incorporates 7 League, which is a sports digital consultancy and agency in London, MailMan Europe, and MailMan APAC, like I mentioned, in Singapore as the HQ. And we work with 4 different types of clients. We work with sports organizations, we work with sports clubs, we work with sports players, and we work with sports brands. And at the core of the service that we work with our clients is digital. We're a purely digital agency, and we work with their social media channels, and we do their digital strategy, we do their local original content production, we have an in-house studio here in Shanghai, we do their e-commerce, we also work in media rights, we do their PR, and we do their fan community building in different regions. So as I mentioned, Shanghai is the HQ of the company. We have about 140 people working out of Shanghai. We have about 35 across Asia. That includes about 10 in Singapore, and then dedicated regional country managers in 9 Southeast Asian countries, including Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, India, Vietnam, and so on. Then we have a couple of people in the US, which we recently opened a few months ago, and we have over 40 in London. So we're very much a global group, and the company was founded in 1999. This was before digital. It was an outdoor postcard media company, and they would literally go to restaurants and bars handing out branded MailMan postcards, hence the name MailMan and where it came from. And then the current CEO, Andrew Collins, bought the company in 2012 at the intersection of, digital was really exploding, with the intention of making this a digital sports company. And I think Liverpool FC were the first client, and then we worked with Manchester United and a number of other sports properties. And we really have grown with a lot of our clients over the years. And just for example, we've worked with someone like UFC for 6 years, Tottenham Hotspur for 7 years. We really invest in our clients and we see it as long-term relationships with them, which have genuinely started as social media services, but as I mentioned, have grown out into the different branches of services because we're always looking to grow and with our clients, and at the end of the day, bring them more revenue and build them a successful global media business.
That's perfect. That's a huge company. So
yeah, it's grown quickly. I think when I arrived 3 years ago, we had about 70 people in Shanghai. No London office, no Singapore office, no US office. So there's been a real sort of growth over the last few years as digital has become even more important. And I think with the recent COVID pandemic, digital will only accelerate things. You know, there's no fans in stadiums at the moment, and the need to have a strong digital product to engage and entertain your fans is more important than ever right now.
Yes, definitely. So you are based in China, and China is a market that every global sports entity wants to enter, but a lot of them make the mistake of treating it like any other market. So what type of homework a brand that wants to enter this market should do?
A lot of homework. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. China is unlike any other country in the world. It's, you know, it's Mars. It's just completely different, and that goes from the language, from the culture, from the people, from the nuances, from, you know, the different industries. And I'd say this first and foremost is you can't even treat China as one country. You have to sort of treat China as a continent with different countries inside of China, because China is so big. It makes up around 1/7 of the world's population. And there's so many different regions and provinces and cultures within China that you really now have to tailor your strategy to certain regions, let alone to China. So when you mention homework, you know, you have to really be, I'd say, patient is one of the key things we would suggest to you know, anyone that wants to enter to China. Expect to be in it for the long term. There is no quick fix in China. You can't come in, make money overnight and then leave. No one's ever done that. So yeah, the NBA is probably the perfect example of a sports property that has been in it for the long term. The late David Stern came out to China in, I think it was the late 70s or early 80s. He was at the office of CCTV. He was giving them videotapes of the highlights of that, you know, the weekend's games, and, you know, getting that product in front of eyeballs early. And you look 30, 40 years later and they've built this business, you know, all right, there's been some pitfalls and there's been some crises happened recently, but it's still an incredibly strong product. People still love to watch and play basketball, and it's still head and shoulders above any other international sports property in China. So as I mentioned, patience, you need to be in it for the long term, and you need to choose the right people to work with. You need to choose the right partners, because you need people on the ground there to be your eyes and your ears and everything else. So doing research on, you know, who are the best people to work with, partner with, which local, you know, government you want to work with, because, you know, the government control everything here. So you really want to make sure that what you're doing is accepted and appreciated, and that you're giving back to China. There's been too many examples of sports organizations, clubs coming in and just trying to take. What you need to do is you need to invest, whether that's in the grassroots or in the communities. And then once you know, have the acceptance of the Chinese people and the fans, that's when you can start to see a return. But I'd say that those are the three key things that you should focus on when looking to go and work in China.
Perfect. You mentioned the NBA. Having a Chinese player helps, at least I believe so. Now, we could see that years ago when Yao Ming played for the Houston Rockets in the NBA. Now we have Wu Li playing in Espanyol, which made a club that is a medium club in Spain gain recognition in the country. Do you think that this could be a strategy to raise awareness of a brand not only in China, but in the whole Asian Pacific market to bring athletes from these countries?
Oh, absolutely. It's absolutely huge. I mean, people talk about the Yao Ming effect, and people still talk about the Yao Ming effect, and sure, but he's a one-off, or there's not many of him. And you mentioned Wu Lei, obviously going to La Liga, going to Espanyol. Espanyol's popularity just exploded in China because, you know, he was the first example, I'd say, of an actual good footballer going to play in Europe and playing in the first team, scoring goals and doing well. You've had examples in the past of players going to play in Europe and they've just sat on the bench and they've basically been there to be a commercial commodity to grow a fan base across Asia. You think to Shinji Kagawa, who played for Manchester United, you know, the Japanese player who moved from Dortmund. And there's been a few others, but it's definitely true that if you have an Asian player in your team, your popularity, your digital presence and follower growth will for sure improve and get better. But I think, you know, Wu Lei was the best example of having an Asian player, but him actually making a noticeable difference on the pitch. And it's really helped. Then it's interesting to see, you know, what will happen when he leaves. Will Espanyol lose, you know, thousands of followers, and will La Liga be as popular? And, you know, what effect will that have on media rights? There's many questions. But for sure, having a local hero for any league or club or sport definitely makes a difference. And I think another good example would be the UFC. Ultimate Fighting Championship. They currently have the first ever Chinese champion. She's called Zhang Wei Li. She won a belt in China a while ago, and then last year, and then she retained it this year in Vegas in what was dubbed the greatest fight of the year so far. And she's really elevated the sport. She's taken it to the next level. So having a local hero or having a local person in your team or organization, 100% can only help.
And the UFC kind of did what you said. That they not only they have a Chinese champion now, but they built a huge training center in China too. So it's something that they are building something for the longer term, right?
That's what I mean, and that's what I said before about investing in China before you can take. This is about as big an investment as you could ever see. You know, it's a multi-million-dollar complex. I've been there many times. It's where they have a partnership with the Chinese Olympic Committee. So Chinese Olympic athletes will go there and train. So you're giving this platform, not just for UFC fighters, but you're giving it to the Olympians of China to go and train. And it's just it's an incredible facility. You know, there's no stone has been left unturned. They've thought of everything. And the UFC, you know, it's no coincidence why, you know, that they've been doing so well on digital. I think they're the fastest growing sports property on Douyin, the Chinese version of TikTok. They're only second in followers behind the NBA. They've got a local champion. They've got the Performance Institute. They have events that have happened in China, and they've really invested. And like I say, you know, MailMan has worked with them for 6 years now, maybe longer. And it's been great because, you know, when we started working with them, they were a team of 2 or 3 people in China, but now they have this grand Performance Institute with many staff, 22 current athletes training at the Performance Institute. So yeah, it just shows that if you put your mind and you invest properly, the rewards are there to be reaped.
Yeah, they are creating that bond with the Chinese population, right? It's not about, like you said, it's not about just getting money. They are giving back to the community, so that makes the whole difference.
Yeah, and it's tough because at first, you know, it's seen as a blood sport, it's seen as a violent sport at times, and to have that accepted by the government, by the media, by the people, it wasn't easy. So they've had to really be patient, as I mentioned before, and, you know, turn the, you know, it's an entertaining product as well. And
so we are talking a lot about China, but there are in the Asian Pacific market, there are some other countries that could be good opportunities for sports entities to expand their fan base too. What other countries would you highlight, especially when it comes to football?
Yeah, I think other than China, you can look at North Asian countries such as South Korea and Japan, have traditionally been good at football. They hosted a World Cup, I remember, and they have very popular players. I think if you look at Song Heung-min, who plays for Tottenham, from South Korea, and you've had Kagawa from Japan, who I mentioned before. They traditionally have good players, and it's popular. Then if you go down to Southeast Asia, there's a couple of countries that are sort of very interested in football, and it is growing there. There's big opportunities. I think Thailand is an interesting one for football clubs. I think they enjoy football there. They have a lot of sort of amateur leagues and a professional league. India is a very interesting one. Such a huge population, growing economy. They've tried to, entice famous footballers before. I remember previously you had Alessandro Del Piero, Diego Forlan, these guys playing in the league, albeit they were past their peak, they were still there. The only problem with India is you're fighting with cricket, and cricket is just so popular. But I still think there's room for football to grow. And then other countries, Indonesia is sort of growing in football as well. Malaysia, and a couple more of those Southeast Asian countries. There's definite opportunities there. Although China is definitely a big and more appetizing one for football clubs and brands, I still think Southeast Asia is only going to go from strength to strength moving forward.
You worked with La Liga in Indonesia, right?
We used to.
I'm sorry.
not anymore, but we used to.
Okay. So, if you could choose 3 MailMan case studies that you consider your favorite, what would those be?
That's a very, very good question. So if I had to highlight a couple of case studies, I think the first one I would choose is the NHL, the National Hockey League, simply because it's still quite a niche sport in China. But if you look at where they've come in just a few years in terms of their journey of going from pretty much ground zero to being established across a large number of digital platforms with a great following. They've had 4 pre-season friendlies, 2 in each year, and in the last few years. You've got the Winter Olympics in Beijing on the horizon. Hockey is going to become just more and more popular as a sport. It's becoming more of a community event, hockey, and they've done a great job in uniting the fan base and educating the market. And at MailMan, we've helped them with their social, their digital. We did their ticketing when they came to China. We do their PR. We do their community building. And it's really been great to sort of work with such a respected organization on their entry to market and grow with them over the years to where they are now. And we believe that there's still a long way to go. And, we're excited to go with that with them. There was a lot of learnings for us along the way, a lot of learnings for them. And we believe that it's just going to continue to go from strength to strength. Another case study, as I mentioned, would be the UFC. One of the longest serving clients for MailMan in China. And, what started off as very simple, number of social posts per week. We've worked alongside them, throughout their journey, creating, hours and hours of original content, helping them put on their events, making them become one of the most popular sports on social, despite being what we mentioned before as being sort of a blood sport or a fight sport, and really just sort of being part of that journey with them has been excellent. And if I was to choose a third, if I sort of take it away from a long-term partnership and look at more specific case studies, I think a good one would be the New England Patriots and Tom Brady. So what we did with Tom Brady is we created the first ever China-specific studio show for the Patriots of any NFL team. So they would do sort of half-an-hour segments every week, I believe it was, doing very specific localized content for China with a Chinese host and, you know, very cultural specific Chinese sections. And you'd have a 10-minute part where Tom Brady would be there and you'd be speaking Chinese, trying Chinese games. And this really elevated the Patriots to become the #1 followed NFL club on social in China, created a huge fan base for them. You know, China's an icon market. Fans tend to follow a player more than they follow a team. So someone like Tom Brady was perfect. And it's about utilizing that star power, creating a great product that will entertain fans, and specifically for them. What a lot of sports organizations used to do is they would take their content from global, they would put Chinese subtitles on, and then they put it on social media, and they think, done. You know, you could get away with that maybe 7-8 years ago. You just can't do that anymore. Chinese fans demand more, they're smarter, they're digital natives, and they want to, you know, they want to feel, you know, that they're being talked to directly rather than just having some subtitles. So this was a great case study of, you know, having a great athlete, having a great sports team, and creating something original, organic, local for the market. And if you look at the engagement figures, you look at the comments, you look at the growth, it's no surprise that they grew to be the #1 team.
That's perfect. That's perfect. So every year, the MailMan Group promotes the Red Card Awards, and I would like you to explain to our audience what it is and what were the highlights of the 2020 edition. It's something that I recommend if you want to, if anyone that wants to know a little bit more about China, about the Chinese market, it's something that it's really great to read. So explain to our audience what it is and what were the highlights of the 2020 edition, please.
Yeah. I mean, I'd say this, the Red Card is probably one of the most important and influential things that MailMan has ever done. This year was the 8th edition of the Red Card, and it has grown every year, adding elements in different sections. And at its core, it's basically the industry standard, looking at the top European football leagues, clubs and players online in China. And it's an analysis and a benchmark of, you know, who's doing the best. You're looking at the metrics and methodology for who's the most successful teams. And it's just naturally built out from, you know, the first edition that would just be pretty much a table listing the top teams and their figures. It's really grown into much more of a comprehensive analysis of the landscape in China for European football clubs, leagues and players, and going much more in depth into what they're doing. And I think 3 years ago, we introduced about 10 more awards. So as well as the 3 standard awards for the #1 league, the #1 player, the #1 club, we now have specific awards for best, you know, technology, use of technology, best innovation, best grassroots, best use of fan clubs, just so we can give more recognition to the industry. And I think it was 2 years ago, we grew that into an offline event, a physical awards event offline in our office. And then earlier this year was the first time we did it at an event location. We had people fly in from all over the world, and it was just a great night of celebration and fun. And it's always picked up on by international media. They're always referencing it, you know, throughout the year about the real benchmark. And it gave us great credibility and great thought leadership in China for this report. And we now do one for the NBA, and it's becoming its sort of own product, and we'll look to do with more sports throughout the years. But yeah, it's a comprehensive analysis of European football, and it's always very well received, and it's something that we're very, very proud of at MailMan.
That's perfect. Like I told you, it's a great way to know more about the Chinese market and the good practice that are being done there. So entities that want to enter the market should be reading it.
Yeah,
so,
there's a load of great case studies in there and examples of what clubs and teams and players have done. So that, hopefully there's good learnings in there for anyone that wants to come to China and engage and grow a fan base and eventually build a successful business.
Yes, definitely. So let's talk a little bit about Brazil now. The Brazilian league is not broadcasted in China. How much is it something that stays on the way of building a Chinese presence?
So having presence on TV or digital platforms, you mean? How important is it?
Yes. The fact that the league is not broadcasted to China, do you think that this is something that really stays on the way of a Brazilian club that wants to try to build that presence in the country?
100%. Yeah. If you're not present on the channels, then it's going to be very difficult to generate awareness and exposure for the league. Brazil is arguably the most famous football nation in the world, most successful. And every time you think of Brazil, you think of football. So Brazil has an advantage in that sense that they are instantly connected with football. But on the flip side, they're just not present here. Other than having a number of very good Brazilian players playing in the Chinese Super League, and other than the World Cup once every 4 years for the men's and then for the Women's World Cup now, which is happening more regularly, there's not really much exposure for Brazilian football. If you spoke to Chinese people on the streets and asked them to name a Brazilian team, they probably would struggle to name one or two. You ask them to name a Brazilian player, they'd probably be able to mention a few, Oscar and Hulk and these guys. But if you're not available on TV or on digital to show your league and show the quality of the league, then it's going to be very difficult to make people aware of the games. So yeah, it's definitely one of the key reasons why Brazil, I feel its teams, its league hasn't really taken off yet in China. But I believe there's definitely opportunity there for brands and clubs and leagues and players.
And like you mentioned, that there are a lot of Brazilian players in China, some of them with successful careers. And how do you think the work could start? It's something that should come from the Brazilian league, should come from the Brazilian Confederation with the national team, or a club could start its own work. How do you think should be the path to start something in China?
Yeah, I think it all starts from your social media. I think you've got to create a presence here. You've got to create a product, and you've got to grow awareness. As I mentioned before, there's no quick fix. You have to be patient. You have to put time and effort and investment into your product, and you have to create really engaging and interesting content. And you want to make yourself different. You want to make yourself unique. You don't want to be doing what every other football club is doing online in China, because you won't stand out. I think for Brazilian clubs, it would be about coming here, being brave, trying to do something different with their channels that makes them stand out. And there's also no substitute for being on the ground in China. Obviously, right now it's very difficult because of the border laws, but visiting China, visiting communities, playing matches here, making people aware of who you are is huge. And I feel like Brazilian clubs who come here, people would fall in love with the teams because it's such a beautiful style of football. At the end of the day, it's entertainment. And the entertainment industry compared to football or sports industry in China is so much bigger. So what a lot of teams are doing now is they're doing a lot of crossovers. They're doing football plus esports, or football plus fashion, or football plus celebrity engagement and things like that. Because it's helping you to reach a much wider mass audience in China. So yeah, I think growing social channels, growing the presence is key. being on the ground, whether that's opening an office, having staff members here, coming here on tour, coming here with partners, working with the Brazilian embassies even to help you get your product and name out here. There's many different ways, and it'll take time, but if you get it right and you invest in the time, for sure it'll happen eventually.
That's perfect. That's perfect. In the Red Card report, you highlight the importance of physically being there. So you talked a little bit about it, but how much is the offline work really important for building the presence in China?
It's massive. If you have an established office here, it means that you have somebody day to day speaking to your local partners, speaking to the government, speaking to the communities on the same time zone, in the same language, and just it shows respect that you're willing to invest, have an office, spend time there, and talk to people. So yeah, there's a lot of sports organizations and clubs that have offices here, and they will tell you 100% how important it is for them to be there day to day and speak with people, like I mentioned, face to face. There's no substitute. We're talking on Zoom now and it's great, but I'm sure if we were sat in a pub having a beer or having a conversation, it'd be even better just because of that, the ability to communicate in person. And culturally in China, a lot of business deals and decisions and conversations, they happen around the dinner table with a bottle of beer, and that's how things get done. So I think culturally it's very important to be here and show face. There's a Chinese word called mianzi, which means face. It means showing face to your partners or people that you're doing business with. And by being here in the same room and doing it with them will be very important. So being offline and being able to be at offline activations, partner functions, press events, networking events, it's absolutely vital. So yeah, I'd say if you have the opportunity to open an office or even have a member of staff here, it will make a difference for sure.
That's perfect. And you also mentioned esports. Esports is huge in China and in Brazil too. There are some famous football clubs here that now have good and successful esports teams. Do you think it could be a good strategy for a Brazilian club to start building its brand in the country through esports and then introduce football?
Yeah, definitely. I don't think it's any secret that esports is so popular in China, especially with the Generation Zs and the Alphas and the younger generation. It's a really growing sport. Tencent, pretty much dominates esports in China. They invest a lot. Also, Alibaba and ByteDance have heavily invested in the sport, and it's only going to get bigger. And if I know a couple of European football clubs, they're already doing it. Paris Saint-Germain, Manchester City, Wolverhampton Wanderers. I'm sure there'll be more and more who are investing into this space with an esports team, and it's gonna grow your reach across different demographics, and it just gives you an extra, presence in market. And you look at during COVID when there was no live sport, esports absolutely was where everybody was. Playing games, keeping in touch with friends, doing online games. So I think it's definitely a wise move. Whether it would be a starting point for a football club is still, I'm not sure. I still think having a social media presence first and having that base that you can then leverage off. So if you just have an esports team, but then it's not pointing anywhere, it's not pointing to your social channels or things like that, it's going to be tough. You could launch at the same time, would be a good play. But I'd say, get a digital presence first, and then you can start looking at, investing in esports teams and properties.
Perfect. So Denis, final question now. What is your vision and the company's vision for the next 5 years?
For the company, I'd say it's becoming, the world's leading sports digital agency and consultancy, with with our presence in China as the HQ, but as I mentioned before, with offices, you know, in London, in Europe, and the US and Singapore, it's being able to offer a global service to our clients. You know, across every region, we can help with them with their agency work or their consultancy work, and build a fan base and generate revenue globally. It is the real ambition. And as I mentioned, 3 years ago, I was here in Shanghai and there was only MailMan Shanghai. Now we have, you know, global offices and a real global offering to our clients. So yeah, I'd say, you know, in 5 times we're servicing, you know, current clients. We have across a lot of regions, include FIFA, the Qatar World Cup, the NBA, the NHL, Chelsea. You know, we work with Ronaldo and Beckham. So, you know, being able to grow these clients' businesses across the world is what we envision ourselves doing.
And do you have plans to have an office, not in Brazil, but maybe in Latin America, or it's something that you are not thinking about it right now?
I mean, for sure, it's an area that we have our eyes on. I think sort of the natural transition in terms of our clients was, you know, across Asia and Europe and the US. And then I think the next step would be to look at sort of more South American regions for sure. So keep an eye out for that one, and hopefully we'll have one there soon.
Yeah. So Denis, thank you very much for your time and for sharing your knowledge with us. I would like to give you space to send our Brazilian audience a message.
I first of all appreciate you giving me this time to speak and talk about MailMan and what we do. And to your audience, if you're genuinely thinking about China as a region, as a country that you would like to grow in, or, you know, have a simple conversation about, then, you know, please don't hesitate to drop us a line. We'd be more than happy to talk with you, you know, advise you on how to grow a successful business here, and, you know, hopefully one day we can work together.
Perfect. Thank you, Denis. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Pessoal, espero que vocês tenham gostado desse papo incrível aqui com o Denis Green. Ele que é o Head of PR, é o cara que comanda as relações públicas do MailMan Group, uma das maiores agências de marketing esportivo do mundo. Trocamos essa ideia muito bacana. Antes de me despedir de vocês, só lembrar que toda terça e toda quinta, às 16 horas, nós temos o Enzima Live Show aqui no canal da Pluri, então fique ligado, e depois essas nossas conversas viram podcast nas principais plataformas de podcasts, então o Spotify, o Deezer e o Google Podcasts. Muito obrigado a todos vocês que ficaram até o final, espero que vocês tenham gostado e até a próxima. Tchau, tchau.